If you are interested in acquiring any of my Overkills tutorial guides from Microsoft Flight Simulator, or simply interested in supporting the channel, please consider joining us on Patreon. Patreon subscribers level tier 2 and above have access to all of my guides, as well as any future releases that come down the road. Patreon link can be found in the description below. Hello Flight Sim fans, and welcome back to another episode of Microsoft Flight Simulator. But today we are going to be talking about the Bravo throttle quadrant along with the 737 Pro Series set from the Flight Sim factory. I reviewed a previous version of this hardware, you guys, and today we're checking out its latest release, and there's some very awesome differences. I do want to start out by letting you guys know that all links to these items, as well as a discount code, can be found in the description below, so make sure that you guys check that out and save yourself a bit of cash on the way out. First off, the QR code. Make sure that you guys, if you do purchase one of these sets, you use this QR code. It's a 6.5-minute video that it takes you to on YouTube, walks you through absolutely everything from the installation, also to best use case scenarios, as well as tips and tricks on how to properly use the functionality that's offered in this kit. Now, this kit offers a couple of different variants. If you go with the full 7X7 series, you can buy just the 737 series, or you can also purchase the 787-8, 787-10, as well as the 777 D10s. So again, quite a few different options there, depending on what simulator has your heart at the moment. Now, what separates these from any other add-ons that are currently out there for the Bravo throttle quadrant? In my personal opinion, there are two main factors that really have always grabbed my attention in regard to these. First off, the 1-to-1 scaling on the flap, speed brake, and throttle size. I have very large hands, so one of my downfalls have always been with the Bravo is how tiny all of the controls always were. It's a very awesome set. As we all know, the Bravo throttle from Honeycomb is an absolutely beautiful and amazing piece of hardware. But check out the size difference here, you guys. Look at the size of these handles in comparison to what comes standard with it. It is a massive increase. Everything from the throttle to the thrust reverser, speed brake, and flap handles are now 1-to-1 scale and feel significantly different. You guys are going to see some hand comparisons here in just a few minutes. But that's the first thing. I put these on, I increased the tension on the roll axis for the throttles, or for the axis and all of them on the Bravo. And then these things feel significantly different than what they do with the stock configuration. Really recommend it. The next thing that obviously stands out that really shines apart is the way that the D10s are designed. They are very smooth. They are very well actuated, and they're very intentional. And what I mean by intentional is it's very difficult to do anything on these configurations by accident. And especially with the flap configuration, which we're going to talk about the flap configuration here in just a minute in more detail. But there are 1-to-1 scaling and 1-to-1 features of the real Boeing 737. One of the other things that I really like about this set is if you guys look underneath the flap detents, you can see now two beautiful covers for the unused axis. Now let's go ahead and talk about the flap detents as we were talking about just a minute ago. The flap detents is sort of a pin and spring system. It's got a combination. There is a spring lift on both the speed brake and the flap handle. But now you also have the stop gates that exist in the real 737 and 7X7 series aircraft. Now, they actually have a real-world purpose. The stop gate for flaps 1 is in the event of a single engine outage, you actually have a giant gate that the pin has to sit in. And what the idea behind that is, again, in single engine outage, the idea is that way the aircraft on takeoff cannot inadvertently be reduced to 0 flaps. Basically have the flaps retracted all the way on a single engine takeoff at low speed emergencies. Okay. The idea behind that essentially is that if you are going to retract the flaps, they want to make sure that it was very intentional and that you couldn't have done it by accident. Flaps 15 is a very similar situation. In the event of a 2-engine go-around, so you're on approach and have to execute a go-around, you do not want to rapidly think about what your approach speed. You're probably down to 130 knots by the time you execute a go-around usually. You would not want to accidentally come past flaps 15, dump a bunch of flaps or retract a bunch of flaps real quick, lose lift on the wing, and plummet down to the ground when you're probably only sitting at about 1,500 to 2,000 feet. So again, these exist in the real aircraft. Now, a tip on the flap configuration, and you guys are going to see how this all works inside the simulator here in just a minute. But talking to the flap configuration for just a minute, make sure that you guys take some time before you get in the sim and practice. On the speed brake, it actually has an armed position now that you have to actually lift the speed brake out of its detent into the armed position, and then same thing out of armed into the flight control position. Now, one of the really cool things about the speed brake configuration is that the detents exist only in the extend position, but there is no detent necessary whatsoever to go from fully extended to full down. You simply just push the speed brake handle forward and they drop back into the down position. Again, just like the real aircraft. So pretty slick stuff. You guys are seeing some of the size comparisons I was talking about here. These, again, are the 1-to-1 scale. You guys can sort of get an idea on how big my hands are and why this was such a very, very nice and very, very welcomed expansion for the Bravo throttle quadrant. Now, guys, I know I'm talking about the 737 and the Boeing series in general, but I want you guys to be aware in case you haven't checked it out already. He has quite a few different aircraft configurations, all the way down to general aviation configurations on his website. So again, make sure you guys check that out. They are very, very nicely done. Very, very nicely done. Here you can see us actuating the flaps we were talking about before. Once you get good at it, you can get very, very fast with it. I haven't had it for that long, you guys. It's only been a couple of days. I only spent probably about 30 minutes. That's probably overdoing it too. Maybe 10, 15 minutes is more accurate. Just sort of getting comfortable with how the flap detent works. Now you guys can see that it's got pins that actually keep the speed brake handle and the flap handle in. You can see that T pin down at the bottom right now next to the trim word. On the left side at the base. Really, really slick system. It doesn't like latch into anything. It just creates a bit more tension, preventing from accidental retrieval of the particular handle. The throttle handles, you just pull on them and yank them off. You guys know that they are tough to get off because remember the throttles themselves, the arms themselves are the default arms. We just took the handles off. But tell you what, let's go ahead and jump into the sim now and check this out in the PMDG 737. And everything you are about to see will not be using SPAD.next as it is intentionally designed to use the default MSFS controls. All right, you guys, so now we are inside of the simulator. And I want to make sure that you guys get a good idea of how all this stuff works. Now, we're sitting in the 737. We're on the ramp in Tucson. We're not going to go flying or anything like that because really what I want you guys to see is just all the functionality that comes with this particular setup and how smoothly everything actually does operate. So let's go ahead. We're just going to get started here right now with the speed brake here. Now all I'm going to do is move it into the armed detent, okay? And you can see we are now armed. Disarm. I mean, just perfect, absolutely smooth. As soon as it stops, you hear the click inside the sim. And then obviously to find the flight detent and drop it back in. Full aft. Drop back in. Back to armed for landing, whatever it may be. Just sweet. The other thing I want you guys to see is sort of use the camera here that I've got to see the size comparison to these to what you're seeing in real world in the sim. I mean, it's just, they're so nice. And they feel so much better. And I don't think I have the parking brake set. Oops. But anyway, the throttles feel amazing. I'm kind of at a weird angle here because I'm not sitting where I would normally sit. Otherwise, my shoulder got in the way of the camera. So that's why you guys are seeing sort of my fingers grabbing it the way I am, is I'm not sitting with the throttle where I would normally have it. It's sort of way off to my right here. But just grabbing that in comparison, the feeling is so much smoother. It's so much nicer. What I would recommend is if you guys get this set, and I do recommend you guys get this set, increase your tension on the Bravo because that made a huge difference. And remember, you guys, this is the 7X series configuration. He's got the 777s, he's got the 747, he's got the 737 configurations here. Now the flap, this is what we were talking about earlier in the video where you wanted to make sure that you practice and really got comfortable with it before actually getting into the sim and how it operates. So if I want to set flaps 1, you guys can see you can do that pretty darn quick once you get the hang of how it works. Let's go to flaps 10. Oops, 15, excuse me, not 10. But let's say I want to go to flaps 10. Let's come back down. Helps when I'm actually paying attention to what I'm doing. Going back over to flaps 1, back into flaps up. It's called flaps 5. Flaps 15. And then coming back to full flaps. Or flaps 30 or 25, which we normally use for landing. Okay, so there's 25. There's 30. So you still get that nice lift action. Now, the only ones that I actually have to push it through are these ones here. And you're meant to. He actually says it in his directions in the video. If you guys follow that QR link that I was showing you guys earlier, he actually says, with the detents, learn to push the flap handle back down. Now, obviously, in the real thing, it comes down on its own, but I actually don't have any problem with that. So, like, if we go to flaps 1, it comes back. If I want flaps 15 again, I didn't push that time. I'm literally just lifting, dropping it in. That time maybe I did out of habit. I'm sort of tapping it with my thumb, but like it's not you have to push it down in. The other thing I really like, I like that he added the guards to the extruding axis handles for the unused surfaces where the detents are. Before, I believe these were exposed on the previous versions of this configuration. So I really like that he added these. I love how slick it all looks. I love the size. The size is so much better. Feels so much more realistic. Makes it much easier to handle. It really does change the game, you guys. You wouldn't think that the size of the handles would make that big a difference. You take the size of the handles, the incredible job with the 3D printing that's clearly done here, how clearly everything is labeled, and you can see it just beautifully. Ignore the sim for a second. The detents are just priceless. I absolutely love it. And the feeling is just it's night and day. The feeling makes it feel like it's so much more real. It's so much less simulated because your entire hand. I mean, here, let's do this. I'm gonna come away from the mic for a second. That would be my hand in a normal state. And guys, I have giant hands. Okay,